Being a governor as well, and you'll be having your next meetings in April. These are the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. Now, with this strong announcement of the President of the World Bank, if we assume that matters are going on track, that the board is nominated by mid-January or maximum by end of January, the 90 days rule might really be a good reference for a good conversation between you and the President of the World Bank. This is one. Second, yes, two seats from small islands, but there are representations as well from developing economies and emerging markets that make the majority of the board, and there are many common issues of concern with the rest of the developing economies. And the good news is, given that I've been the board of these institutions, chairing them or member of one of them, decisions are being made by consensus normally. Votes happen occasionally and if needed and when needed. So I think given this consensus rule, one or two seats are powerful enough, and you can always, your representative can use the consensus rule and the minority privileges in that matter. Right, Honorable Minister. Thank you. Any reactions, sir? Thank you. Do you like to take the floor? Do you have any reactions to what was raised already? Excellency?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Maybe I'll take the floor now. And I think I'll share what I have to share, and I won't be too far away from what I presented earlier on. I will continue to stick to what I have presented. And to well acknowledge the time needed to set in place the technicalities and bureaucratic processes needed in place before fully operationalizing the loss and damage fund, as we've heard. So, somehow, Tuvalu and other LDCs sits and vulnerable countries are continuously suffering the brunt and impact of climate change. The IPCC's, or the science, has informed us and indicated the way the compass is spinning, and yet, having listened to the discussions in the room, we are still concerned on the architecture of the funding mechanisms, which is critical and crucial. But our cry for attention on maximizing means to access climate finance available under the current arrangements we've heard never change. Coming from a scientific background, we believe in complications and prognosis of situations, and this is exactly the message I want to share. And I think it also reflects some of the questions that have been shared this morning. I mean this afternoon from the floor, and it's that fear of not being able to reverse and replace the damages that climate change is going to impact, not only in our vulnerable countries, but in the world, on a global level. So my contribution is in a way to share. I think as countries wait for these technical mechanisms to take place or to get fully operationalized. I also want to share that in countries like Tuvalu, we have some innovative measures. Because of the delays and the difficulty in accessing climate finance at the right time or when it is needed, Tuvalu set up what is called a Tuvalu Climate Survival Fund. It's not in millions, in big amounts, but it's enough to address the immediate impacts while we await the promised financing mechanisms that are available. And I'm talking about some that we've been trying to access, like the Green Climate Fund. Yes, we've managed to have assistance through those funding mechanisms. But as mentioned, I recall when we tried to send in a project proposal, it was like in 2015, and in 2019 we were accredited. We got assistance through some MIEs or multilateral implementing entities, because we don't have a national implementing entity. And it's only like after 8 years, that was when I was in government. When I'm out of government, the fund that we have access to is still not reaching us. And after 8 years, it's on the ground. So I share the same sentiment that's been shared on the hardships that we face in countries at the forefront of climate change. And we hope that while we're taking time to ensure we have the right architecture and the funding mechanisms we have before we operationalize the funds, we also have mandates to ensure that we deliver with other funding mechanisms available in a way that countries can avoid overspending on the cost of the loss and damages they have, and they are affected with by climate change at the cost of their competing national interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much on bringing this experience from the field and your experience in government and your experience now. And there are issues about cost effectiveness and guiding the policymakers and innovative solutions that need to be scaled up. But perhaps in this round, without imposing direction on your comments or questions, given that the fund has already been formed, we're not challenging that now. The decision has been made. After many deliberations and discussions, 4 meetings in Egypt, 1 meeting here in Abu Dhabi, it was thought that this could be the best vehicle, being practical and knowing the institution called the World Bank, what they can offer and what they may not, guarding the institution from any unnecessary intervention, getting the governance right. There is a sunset clause for this institution to start its operation fast and disbursement fast. There will be new dynamics, especially on the emphasis on the prevention, not the cure, especially in areas related to adaptation. But if you assume here that you have the co-chairs of the fund with you, and that could really be summarized and shared, what are your specific expectations from the early days of operation of this institution? Of course, there will be more formal ways in governance and feedback, but given that every kind of experience from the field helps, and this is the power of localized knowledge, direct experience that could be shared, it could be definitely put in a form of more formal way for the new setup to benefit from. In addition to any question that you may have still on the floor, I'd like really to get guidance from you, expectations from you on how this fund should really function and partner with either you have an institution or an organization or are affiliated with one of them, or just following this issue because of experience or in partnership. That would be very, very useful. Digging back in the past, which is just a few days or an hour before the establishment of this COP, because the decision was already been made. A fund established last year, operationalized starting with this COP. There's going to be a board with the responsibilities, with co-chairs, what you are expecting for this fund to function. Yes, we know World Bank is not a perfect organization, but please let me aware of one perfect organization and we start to emulate somewhere else. Right. But it's good in many aspects, working there in 10 years before. I can tell you it can do good, good work with good partnership. And I give you examples of what worked. Yes. Yes. It doesn't need to be just reactions. Even if you have questions still, please. Yes, ma'am. Microphone there. 2. Any questions from the right?
I'm Millie from Vanuatu. I
Yep.
really appreciate you asking this question.
Yep.
Because our tropical cyclone are really up to chance. And as the water gets warmer, the cyclone gets more extreme and catastrophic. So this year alone, in March, we had 2 TC5, category 4 and 5, one on Monday, one on Wednesday. And then last month, we had a category 5 again. So many of our islands are hit and our infrastructure broken. So I guess I wanted to say maybe one way is to really bridge the gap with our existing infrastructure within a country. So is there a way maybe your fund could engage our Rural Development Bank? I'm currently on the board. And so that's something that we could actually have a distribution channel and to help us, realize, because we have agency as well. So we're trying to develop our own risk model. But these are topics that we didn't really have to consider before. And being in a developing environment, it's actually really hard to prioritize development, risk, and abatement and mitigation. So if there's a mechanism in which you could engage us locally, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. They, not us. They. I'll be speaking on your behalf. Otherwise, you'll see me next time. You will hold me accountable. I could be accountable for other things that I can share with you later, but definitely it is. Yeah, but my responsibility is through the team and the excellent work in the organization of this meeting. We need to have a summary with very specific asks and list of concerns as well to be reflected, and that could be shared informally through me, but definitely through a very well-recognized organization within the mother organization, the UNCDF, caring for the needs of the vulnerable and low-income countries in particular. So they have a concern on that, and they have as well as taken the game because of risks, issues with that. But I'll come back to you on this. But you raise a very important issue on partnership between existing mechanism in the field and local areas, and how can that be more effectively done, and that could be emulated somewhere else. There was a question, 2 questions now. 1, 2. Yeah. In the blue, please. You have a microphone.
Thank you all for spending your time with us today. Really appreciate your input and insights. My name is Rennie. I'm from the Yale Student Environment Coalition in the United States. We know that the new fund needs to be funded now that it's been set up, of course, and that the best way to do that would be with public contributions from the countries who have created the problem, like the United States. But of course, the United States is not pulling its weight in that area. And then in the same meeting that you referenced yesterday, sir, with Avinash Prasad, he mentioned that while insurance and risk sharing would be a good mechanism, possibly in the short term, in the long term, after paying all of those premiums, the insurance companies would likely just drop out when you needed it most. So I'm wondering, in the immediate term, let's say, and then in the long term, what other ways of funding or what other innovative sources of funding do you see being useful here? Thank you.
Good point, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time. I think she has tackled what I wanted to ask. My name is Kate from Uganda, East Africa. I wanted to find out what are the mechanisms that you're thinking, okay, we should think around replenishing this fund, because many countries are looking at it, and at a certain point it will get done. So what mechanisms do we, sustainable mechanisms do we have to replenish this fund? Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Can we take those 3 reactions and then come back and we'll finish on time. Don't worry about time. We'll finish on time exact. But Ibrahim, I'll put you on the spot, but can I facilitate that or complicate that now?
Sure, I'm used to it.
There was a question that was raised yesterday to the co-chairs of finance. As you rightly mentioned, extreme weather conditions, climate change impact, thanks to science, are more or less more predictable than before. Not with the exact date and time, but we know. At the same time, we don't have the resources, finance, technical, and otherwise, that are mobilized sufficiently to deal with these known risks with probabilities of existence. I'm not going to be misled by saying, well, it's uncertain. No, it's certain that there will be high risk in this particular area. But the mechanism that we have so far is basically about the intermittent finance. It's the occasional funding. It's the fundraising when, God forbid, to happen again in the cases of floods or fires in some particular countries at scale, as we have seen, for instance, in Pakistan. The case happened, and then the mobilization when the humanitarian system of the UN tried to intervene. Estimates of cost beyond lives that cannot really be costed or valued or priced, but here about damages to livelihoods and properties were in the neighborhood of 30 billion to 40 billion plus. And what was mobilized is a very tiny, small fraction of what's needed until this moment, despite the intervention of the Secretary General of the UN, going himself to some replenishment occasions and events. Here we have an expert on risk management working in an environment that required this kind. This is what he deals with. This is what his passion is for. But everybody now is talking about this new ways of funding. I was the facilitator of the Green Climate Fund. Everybody celebrated the $13 billion of replenishment. Many thanks to the countries that contributed, and many thanks to the countries benefited from the GCF, pushing the contributors to contribute more. So everybody who has taken this, thank you so much for this. But I can tell you out of experience, for almost a year trying to do this, it was an uphill struggle. It's not easy as it used to be, even to get just the pledge. I'm not talking about these pledges to be translated into funding. If this is the Green Climate Fund as an example, is for it to invest in the prevention, in mitigation, and in the adaptation. But this fund is very different. It cannot really be with the luxury of waiting for a cycle for 6-9 months for replenishment. And as I said, unfortunately, these crises, when they happen, they take the news for a couple of days, couple of weeks, and then we go, unfortunately, into another disaster, another crisis. So, what could be the solutions? Simple question to a man who had seen complexities in operation.
I don't expect anything less from you, Muhammad.
And built on the 3 interventions here, one way or another, including actually solution through local partnerships.
Absolutely.
And having more steady flow, and then the insurance. So I get the local from here, I get the insurance possibilities from the second, and you said more, but I just picked this point. And of course, how can we do better in the replenishment processes that are leaving a lot to be desired?
When I was told you're going to be moderating, I know you're going to put me on the spot many times.
Well, it's good to moderate from time to time. Time for revenge.
I think that there are a couple of points that have been made, and I wish when the board of the Loss and Damage Fund is up and running, they will listen to this conversation. Hopefully we'll show them the video.
Yeah.
Because you brought up 2 issues, which obviously it's an evolving process. Number one is the sustainable fundraising of the fund. The announcements made here are very encouraging, they're very uplifting, but obviously it's the beginning of the process. I'm hoping that when the board is up and running, the first thing they have to put on the table, how do we come up with the sustainable fundraising beyond just the announcement? Because the demand is such that obviously a couple $1 million is not going to help us to meet the demand. I think the second priority for the board would be then once we get the money, what are we going to do with the money? What's the strategy? What are the pillars? What are the program of work? So hopefully the board will look at that as well. But while we're doing that, there are a couple of points that brought up which I think are important. And I think brought up for Vanuatu, and that is to say, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Disaster does not mean the same thing to all of our countries. So I'm hoping that whatever resource we're going to make available will be demand-driven, not supply-driven, to make sure the resources that we provide respond to the demand of our countries. Some deal with tropical cyclones, some with floods, some with drought. So hopefully we'll get to what I call a multi-hazard, multi-year intervention so we can protect the life and livelihood. I think second criteria, equally important. Whatever we decide, in my view, should be guided what I call the human face of disasters. That is a livelihood that we protect, that's the infrastructure that we protect, so that to the extent at least we can claim success in terms of the impact, as opposed to remaining at this governance discussions and not be able to show something that where we've actually been successful. I think there are a couple of winning areas which I believe we can all agree as important. Number one, and I think you brought it up earlier, today, given the advancement and the progress we've made in technology innovation, we should actively mainstream what I call risk profiling to help all of our countries at least have a good understanding of what they're exposed to. You cannot address a problem unless you know what exactly is the problem. So the idea of mainstreaming early warning systems risk profiling, this is something certainly we should make available to all developing countries, Africa included. And I hope the loss and damage will support that exercise as well. I think second, when you come to the insurance market, again, let me make it absolutely clear, it's not the only answer. The advantage of the insurance market is that through a premium facility, through a risk pooling, you can access the resources in as fast as possible, so your first response is actually funded off your government budget so you can save lives. But now I am also mindful that insurance is not always affordable, and that's why I'm hoping the loss and damage will make at least subsidies mainstream to the extent that countries who can't afford to pay the premium could be actually subsidized to the extent we can build the culture of disasters management and financing to the insurance market. I think last but not least, let's also think about other financial instruments, cat bonds, solidarity funding, social protection facilities, whereby you can actually couple the insurance solution to other funding instruments, so together we can actually strengthen the capabilities of government to respond. At the end of the day, the human face of loss and damage should be inspiring all of our intervention. Everything else is technical when it comes to lives of people, and I think that's the message that I will convey to the board if I have the chance to speak to them.
Very good. We have less than 3 minutes, and then the broadcasting of this important event will end. So I like to give quick reactions on agreement and disagreement with what my good brother Ibrahima just shared with us. I'd be happy if you agree with him, happier if you don't disagree, but well, he can't tolerate that. But basically, I think we're not finishing the discussion. It's just starting it. I'm relying on more of this, especially on these important points about scaling up ideas coming from the field. Your point on no one size fits all. This is not just in country level, but in local level, village level solutions that could really be benefiting from an effective partnership and platform. But the Honorable Minister, perhaps a few seconds, and then we'll give opportunities to the rest of the Honorable panelists, and then I'll give the thank yous to Ola at the end.
Thank you, Chair. I think the shortest way is just to agree with my colleagues here. But as I mentioned in my statement, the adoption of a macro, meso, and micro risk transfer instruments is seen by climate vulnerable countries like Tonga as an integrated approach to address and minimize loss and damage, which is very important. And this is a prime example of a locally led adaptation. Unlike high-level policies that are distant from the realities on the ground, locally led initiatives can leverage local knowledge and also capacities. And such initiatives also have inherent resilience. They are more attuned to the local needs and can more readily adapt to evolving challenges.
Right.
In Tonga, for instance, we are working closely with our communities to build climate resilient infrastructure, to promote sustainable farm practices, and to preserve our mangroves that serve as a natural shields against storm surges. So adaptation alone is insufficient. As climate risks intensify, we all know that the inevitable loss and damage will far exceed our capacity to adapt. This is where risk transfer financing solutions come into play. And so there are some...
Thank you so
yeah.
much. Sorry about the time constraint. I'm getting signals from the organizers.
Thank you.
That I'll be in trouble if I'm not finished now. But any final reactions from the two distinguished speakers before I give all the... Yes?
Sorry, but we're out of time.
We're out of time. All right? So please accept my apologies, my thanks, my gratitude for having this discussion, more of it in the future. I hope during the preparations of the General Assembly, the UN, and the work of the spring meetings and other events, especially COP29, wherever it's going to be hosted, and we're all focusing as well on COP30. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great panel.
That taught us what are the essential institutions when there's an emergency. And it was not the institutions that we thought. The police sometimes, the local governments in particular, there were a variety of institutions that were able to respond, and we learned how to respond. And I think it's important the Loss and Damage Fund channels resources through existing national mechanisms to existing institutions that know how to deal with an emergency. And I'm going to give you one very quick example of what can go right, what can go wrong in the same disaster, just separated by a decade. I was part of I watched the disaster, flooding on the Zambezi River in the year about 1999, and the local governments and the police, the army were mobilized out of the barracks, and there was a very quick response using local resources. 10 years later, it was designated to the donor community, and the response never came.
Right.
So that's my point. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I think to be more inclusive, perhaps we'll get 3 questions from the floor, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond, not to waste too much time in the interactions. And then you mentioned Denmark, but in my background there was Mark. Why? Because there is a gentleman by the name of Mark Sadler, who is going to be the convener in the short term at least to get this loss and damage fund established. He's a World Bank member of staff with a great deal of experience. So he's going to be one of the people helping in shaping this vehicle at the bank. And some of you may recall that when the president of the World Bank was here, he said that he's going to make this fund operational within 90 days. And in a meeting yesterday in Barbados, Steve Hammer, who was at the World Bank until 8 days ago, and in the finance and climate team, he said the president meant 90 days from the establishment of the composition of the board. So here, the ball is back in the court of the countries to nominate their candidates. You'll have a board to be established. They have a mandate. If you see the documents, it's about 20 plus areas of action that are the responsibilities of this new competent board. But your 2 questions, I'll ask the panelists to go back to. Very specific. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Yes.
Yes.
You say that as long to the loss and damage fund is temporary in the World Bank, everything is really okay. But we already know the history. One of the examples is, for example, the Global Partnership for Education that was hosted by the World Bank about 20 years. But for over 12 years of that, had we in discussion that if it's still there, it will be still there, or what is going to happen with that. So we know the history. So where that blind faith is coming now, and you say that as long we know where the money is go. So what's happening when the World Bank is really expensive? So where that faith is coming?
Very good. Legitimate concerns supported by history of other funds that we need to learn from, but we'll go back to that, and I have perhaps a couple of reactions. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kojo Yauvi, and one of the organization called Action for Development of Sahel. And I thank every one of you here, and I'm highly delighted to hear about the mobilization of the fund, which is dedicated to loss and damage. That we know, every one of us here, that one of the continents which is highly touched by this event, is Africa. And sometimes the response are delayed, even when to give the application is very difficult. My question is, which mechanism the World Bank, which is the place that we lead the funds, we put in place for those that we benefit, most especially the local communities which face the situation will have access to that fund. And is it the fund will be sent only for loss and damage, and we will not think about prevention more than cure? That is, I will stop there before.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yes, perhaps we can get a couple of questions from the right. So 3 plus 2, sorry, I said 3, so 3 plus 2. And then we'll go back there after your reactions. And we need to finish in 2:45. Yeah, we'll get 2 questions. I'll come back to you. 2 questions. Yes, ma'am, and the gentleman. Microphone, please. More guidance. Okay, very good. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Your name, please?
All right. My name is Silosius Chaturuka. I'm from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for the presentation so far. But I've got a question pertaining to the management of the fund by the World Bank.
Okay.
Because there has been a call, especially on the SDGs front, that the current international financial architecture needs to be reconfigured. So I'm not sure whether, in terms of this loss and damage, the architecture would have changed or shifted to suit the changing needs, because there has been an outcry along those lines. And also, we have also noticed that we are focusing on the loss and damage as a fund. But what efforts are there, and how much on the side of the causes of the losses is being done to reduce that? Because in as much as we may want to focus on the losses that have been caused, but those countries that are actually causing the losses, what exactly is being done to address that? Because otherwise we will end up making efforts, raising more money, but the cause of the problem being maintained. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Hi, my name is Avais Khalid. I'm from Pakistan, currently a graduate student at the Indiana University. We've spoken a lot about how the current funding in the loss and damage fund is quite limited, and a significant amount of that money is going to go to the World Bank for their fees for their offices in DC. My question is specifically how do you think the remaining money should be distributed? Who gets the money first? Do we think about countries, for example, like Pakistan, who were faced by floods and had 33 million people underwater, or should we think about coastal communities that are being affected incrementally day by day because of losses and damages that are being incurred?
Right. Okay. What a round of good questions. I'm expecting great answers to them, or at least attempts to answer them. So let me start by you, Brahim.
I mean, as I said earlier, even though I'm a former World Bank official, I am not speaking on behalf of the World Bank, just for the record, but let me give my views. I think there are a couple of things that came up which are a very good point, and I refer to your question about sustainability, but also local content. I think on the sustainability front, it is absolutely important as we mobilize money to repair the damage so we can save lives. Think about the sustainability of the fund in the long run. So we don't wait actually when the money runs out, think about what is the innovative way to mobilize additional resources so we can have a much more sustainable flow of funding. So hopefully when the board is put together, as they put their strategy, the issue about sustainability will be on the forefront of how do you actually mobilize a flow of funding so we can actually support the demand, which is going to be huge. But in the meantime, as I say, because of the human face of loss and damage, we can't wait till the innovation comes in to be able to begin to take some action. So we can do two things at the same time by acting immediately to save life while we think about a much more systematic way. I think second, it is absolutely critical to understand life does not start with loss and damage fund. The organization, both domestically, regionally, have been doing this for a number of years. So part of the solution has to be to empower this institution and make sure they can be part of the solution. So you can build ownership. So the idea of having local content is going to be extremely critical. And I hope organizations like ours will be providing additional resources so we can scale up our intervention to make sure we can be part of the solution. With regard to the World Bank, I think there's a bit of a misperception there. Let's just say it again. The reality is the bank served, my understanding, as a back office to the fund.